Hello, this is Jeff Nyquist with another edition of Friends and Enemies. We're taping this on Saturday, so I've just finished a very large essay on anti-Semitism and National Socialism as a branch of the new religion, socialism, and how it fits in with the communists and the Russians and world wars and so on. So when this video comes out, look to my website, jrnyquist.blog. And be sure to go there and read it because I think, Alex, this will come out on Sunday, you think, tomorrow?
Yes.
And my thing will be posted, I think, later here today on Saturday. And, of course, the importance of this use of National Socialism, making Israel the enemy of mankind. And, of course, the Jews are behind every bad thing that happened from the JFK assassination to the pandemic to 9/11 and the Great Depression and World War I. The stab in the back, it's all about the Jews, is what all these people are claiming. And I'm actually getting on the radio debating anti-Semites and white supremacists and saying, look, guys, you got it wrong. You're heading over a cliff because the communists just love the National Socialists because they can whoop them, they can manipulate them, they can combine with them or kick them in the butt.
Make them destroy things.
Yeah, just to have somebody out there to create chaos and break things. The communists are just sitting there laughing, going, oh, yeah, the icebreaker of the revolution. You could read about it in Victor Suvorov. Hitler had a flag with red in it, with a red a field. Stalin had a flag with a red field. Hitler had a mustache. Stalin had a mustache. Hitler was for the workers and had a workers' party, and Stalin had a workers' party. Hitler was a socialist, and so was Stalin. And it goes on and on, all the parallels. Hitler's girlfriend, his niece, Jenny, what was her name? Rabal. What was her first name?
Which one?
Getty Rabal, Hitler's niece, right? That's how you, is that how you say it? Yeah, she supposedly shot herself with his pistol. Stalin's wife supposedly shot herself with his pistol. You get into it. Suvorov brilliantly goes through all of these parallels. Originally, Hitler's father, before he became a customs official, was studying to be a guy that fixes shoes, right? And so did Stalin's father. Stalin's father beat him. Hitler's father beat him. Stalin's mother was overprotective. Hitler's mother was overprotective. Go get the chief culprit and read it. It's by Victor Suvorov. I'm giving an advertisement for him. But to understand the parallels of National Socialism and Marxism-Leninism, there's a parallel between Hitler and Marx. They had similar character. They were also similar in character. Why are these revolutionaries so similar in character? And why did Eric Voegelin say that it's really the underlying philosophy or feeling is Gnosticism for both the communists and the Nazis? So we're going to discuss that today. And of course, we got some fascinating stuff from Alex. Alex, why don't you give us a lowdown on what you're going to talk about?
Well, I put up this piece. It's called Fractured Standards, the Biggest Disagreements Inside the American Right and How These Fights Weaken Conservatism. Now, of course, these fractures and lines that divide people, that's being used, obviously, being used by the left. And I said this, obviously years ago, the left is going to try to emphasize these problems in the right. It's such an obvious step to do. But it's not just the left that's doing it. It's also people that work for foreign governments. And then it's also the crazies, like National Socialists. So my short piece kind of ties into your new essay. Because it's trending like crazy now on X. If I open my X feed, it's gotten completely useless. Because if you're interested in serious topics, the algorithm seems to think I want to know the latest about this Fuentes guy and everybody else who wants to cash in on this trend. Everybody comes out now being a Nazi and full-blown craziness. They think they're gonna ride this wave all the way to power and wealth and status. It's crazy. It's everywhere. So yeah, we need to.
Let me interject here for a second. Hitler went from being this gutter snipe all the way to being the master of Europe. So this fires up the imagination of these ne'er-do-wells who don't really want to work.
It's
for
a
living,
mechanical.
Right?
It's like a simple mechanical thing. It was like this in Germany back then, and it's like this in America now. Now the Nazis, the NSDAP, they hated conservatives. They absolutely hated conservatives, even though they tried to, piggyback and ride the coattails of conservatism and pretended to be conservative or compatible with conservatives. The Nazis, they let all these high-level aristocrats into the party to placate the population, to say, oh look, these aristocratic families, they've been running Germany for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they like us, so we can't be that crazy, we can't be that dangerous. We're so normal, but then we're not normal, and all these established people from industries, they also got into bed with the Nazis to give the impression that the Nazi movement is kind of normal and nothing too new. And it's all very Roman, they said, and isn't Germany very post-Roman, like all the competing empires, like the French and the British and the Austrian Habsburg guys. Everybody is
the Kaiser really is Caesar, right?
Everybody wants to be the new Rome. So did the Nazis. Nothing new, nothing crazy, but then it was all crazy. So the thing is, back then, especially after World War I, people from my family, people who became very powerful in the Nazi world, like running the party business or being one of the highest party members in the Bavarian NSDAP.
Was your great uncle a Gauleiter in Bavaria? My father's uncle, he was running the day-to-day operations of the NSDAP in Bavaria, and then he went to Berlin in the National Parliament. What was his job title?
He was kind of doing everything. I mean, even in between his political career, he was what would you say in American English? Moonlighting sometimes as a.
Moonlighting. Yeah.
What does moonlighting mean exactly? So
that means you're doing
gig.
Work. A side gig. It's not your main job.
So he was moonlighting at Der Stürmer in various roles. So sometimes it was just a smaller role.
You mean Julius Streicher's newspaper?
Der Stürmer. And at some point, because they were short on leading people there, he was very dominant at Der Stürmer. He was a trained machine engineer guy. He had no idea about how the world works and the empires work and what the British what happened to the British Empire.
Philosophy or history,
nothing,
did he?
Nothing. He was a strict mechanical engineer, like pretty much everybody in the family. But then he was a kid or a teenager in World War I, and judging from the photos and the descriptions, he came back a little crazy, and he pretended to be fine with it. Even though it's a
very violent. World War I was horribly violent, and
when you look at his record,
when you read the biographies of Goering, Himmler, Hess, these guys were wounded in the war. I think Hess got a bullet in the chest. Goering was in the flying circus, with the Red Baron. Ended up being the head of it before the end of the war after the Red Baron's death. I mean, these people, the death-defying, crazy things they did that they lived through, it will warp a person to be in that kind of combat.
They pretended to be fine. Therapy wasn't really a thing back then. I mean, it became a thing, but it was dominated by the left, and the left, they stole all the info.
It was a Jewish thing, is what the Nazis
and the left, I mean, the left was actually, before the Nazis came on, the left was actually pretty dominant with psychology and therapy, but they used it to study the German mind so they could control us better and prepare the revolution better. But that's another topic. So these guys, like my ancestors, they didn't do therapy. They tried to use crazy ass ideology as their therapy, right? So not just did you serve at various points in the war, various areas and fronts as a teenager, your body's getting shot, you're terrified all the time. They used poison gas in World War I. It was just maniacal. But it was also the loss, total loss, total surrender, total humiliation. And then you come out of it and you're broke. You have a background then you have a background in mechanical engineering, but there's no good economy, or you're just a little kid who wants to give you a job. So he got into this movement early on. And when you went in early, especially in Bavaria, you could get very far, even though you're not qualified to run an empire, right? A classic, crazy, tyrannical empire. But that's what they did. And so this particular ancestor of mine, he was not keen on having a regular job either. Neither was Hitler. Hitler was famous for hating actual work, real jobs. There were opportunities even after the war. It was a tough time, but people managed, but not Hitler. He went into ideology.
Nazis were characterized that way, by the way, that they were seeking an escape from actual work.
He wanted to get into the high society and into politics, and he lived in relative poverty for quite a while when his inheritance money ran out. But he didn't care. He was always disappearing. He lived in this dinky little Männerwohnheim. This was just like a homeless shelter, kind of for men only. Mm-hmm. And he always disappeared in like the afternoon. And he went out somewhere, and then he came back like in the morning and slept till the afternoon again, grooming himself like men wouldn't do at the time. And he was poor, but sometimes he would draw pictures, but not great works of art. He would just copy things. He would get like an old postcard from the trash or whatever, and then he would just copy the postcard image and recreate it as a painting, selling a few of them to make ends meet. But that was probably not the only source of money that he had. And this is all very shrouded in mystery. If people want to check out what I figured out all over the years, just a quick reminder here. I put up this piece on my website, candorintel.com. It's called, a very clickbaity title, Eyes Only, the Master Spy File on Hitler and the NSDAP. So this is like the most I can come up with over many years regarding Hitler and his people and espionage. How much they were entangled with compromise, all of it. So This was kind of that's where these people were. And so this is a parallel to today with people you see on the internet now, like this Fuentes character and others. They have actually a problem, or a lot of them, they have a problem with, especially the followers and the not so successful influencers who are fascists or national socialists. They have a problem with conservatism, just like the Germans back in the past. They have a massive problems with conservatives, and that problem is they're not in the upper circles. They don't own many assets. I mean, big houses and status and all the things. They're not in the club. They're not getting in the club. So they're angry about that. And that was the case back then with the Germans. That's not the case case now with Americans. Now, Tucker Carlson is rich. He may do this. He may be Nazi curious for other reasons. He's a rich man. Fuentes, I don't know how much money he has these days, but he was, poor, I guess, and unsuccessful for a while. And so he gets entangled with this ideology and weird people. I think he was hanging out with Ali Alexander, and that was like this whole backstory of him and I think the Capitol event and who really works for what side. Very, very strange. So people can check that. Maybe we can get to that topic in a future episode. But it's like getting in with weird people, getting in with crazy ideology, and then speaking to these young people. That's what Fuentes is doing. Oh, so you're a younger man, or you're maybe in your 30s and 40s or older, and you're bitter and you're frustrated because of how the economy is, and you don't get to you don't get to be as successful as maybe people decades ago, and this is all very frustrating. And problems with women, because women a lot of them are on the left now, and those women and you can't get those women, or you don't want to be with those women because they're crazy and fragile. Those leftist women, to a large degree. But you also have difficulties getting in with the conservative women because they have certain demands or they have certain expectations like money and status. So it's a very frustrating situation, just like for the Germans back then. You're a young man, you want to prove yourself to the world, but very few opportunities. Germany was a tough place. I mean, fractured, old elites, business circles, backroom dealings. It was tough for the average citizen to make a living and raise a family and get established and have some sort of future, to have any life, any quality of life. And so this is what made the success of the National Socialists, because they would this was the kind of key to the success of the National Socialists, because people were so angry and poor and frustrated. And it's the same thing today. So they look at people like animals. Okay, what gets them triggered? How can we trigger them? Okay, like this, okay, so we go with that. If it was any other way, they would be triggered, we would do the other way. But so this is it. And so the crazies and the left and people working for foreign governments, they want to fracture the entire right-wing spectrum, and even people who sit on the middle. They want to just cause, as you said, as much chaos as possible. So in this piece that ties into your essay that will go live, or will be live by the time people see the show, my piece is called Fractured Standards, the Biggest Disagreements Inside the American Right and How These Fights Weaken Conservatism. So just a quick overview. What are the big hot button topics that get people fight with each other, even though they should not be fighting with each other? It's how Hitler and the Nazis are viewed, then what to make of the Jewish world conspiracy mythology, then preference for a free republic versus an authoritarian state, women's rights and social roles, and white power ideology versus a pluralist civic nationalism. So this is kind of a quick overview. This is where you can just cause chaos for the right. And as a quick introduction, I wrote this: the Democrats have been in panic. The Democrats had been in a panic survival mode ever since Joe Biden faded into a vegetative state. Kamala Harris seemed like the perpetual entitled DUI case who would yell, "Do you know who I am?" And Taylor Swift could not, and not even Taylor Swift could make a dent into the cultural shift that was taking place. So the right was thriving on testosterone and a plain "I'm always right because daddy knows best" debating style. Obviously, the next strategy of the left would have been to use the disagreements within the right against them, plus the testosterone-driven, borderline narcissistic "I'm always right" debating techniques. So the most radical right-wingers right now are playing into the hands of the left, and more people are intensifying the effects by using or tolerating bad debating techniques. Very ironic to see men behaving even worse than just simple dogs trying to out-dominate each other with copy and paste pseudo-arguments. They often behave the same way they accuse many or all women of behaving: emotional, irrational, entitled, and playing the victim. This is now the dominant debating style among the right.
Sounds like Nick Fuentes. Did you watch the full interview?
No, I didn't get to watch the whole thing. Please tell me all about it.
Let me tell you the weird thing about it. Well, the two weird things. Nick Fuentes mentioned in passing that he celebrated Stalin's birthday, and he said, "I'm a fan." Mm-hmm. And Tucker Carlson was a bit taken aback because Nick Fuentes has said that Hitler is cool, and he's talked about compared Jews to cookies baking in an oven when talking about the Holocaust very, very horrifically. Mm-hmm. And of course, he's called Slavs monkeys, which is a favorite thing of the Nazis. Hitler didn't like Slavs or Jews, and planned to make Moscow into a giant lake, just exterminate all the urban Russian population and make them slaves on latifundia, the giant plantations when he takes over Russia. But Fuentes makes this statement about Stalin and that he's a fan and he celebrates Stalin's birthday. Excuse me. But then at the end, he breaks in the last segment of it is entirely, he is attacking women. Nick Fuentes, and why he's not married and why he's not involved in with women, and he doesn't have a girlfriend. And it was women are fat and entitled, and what did he fat, entitled, you just, they're terrible. You can't get in, you can't find it. It's sort of like the feminists who say you can't find a decent man anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting, this part, because Nick Fuentes is the poster boy for all the resentments of the National Socialist maladjusted mentality. He is he's a neuter in that respect. He really is he's always contradicting himself and saying strange things. He has this innate crazy Nazi prejudices about Jews. He believes in the conspiracy theory, has prejudice against Slavs and other racial groups, and he doesn't like women. And there is, I think, a fascination with Hitler on the part of Fuentes, although he's not going to say it. And the most ridiculous part of the Fuentes-Carlson interview was where they both were saying how their best friend was Jewish, which is, I mean, it's like, it's self-parody to say that. Oh yeah, well, I'm not prejudiced. My best friend is Jewish. It's like, no, I don't believe. And then, of course, Tucker Carlson makes the point that his hero is St. Paul, in which Fuentes, sort of patting him on the back, says, well, he's Jewish, like, wow, this is a philo-Semitic moment. And it's like, it's Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. It's the banality of the preposterous.
Yeah. It's like normalizing everything now.
It's crazy. I mean,
I call him, I called Fuentes an ADHD bait weasel. This is kind of like how I would describe him, an ADHD bait weasel. It's like this very basic troll, very simple. Anybody can do this. Anybody can just say, they like Stalin, they like Hitler and whatever, and get people riled up. It's plausible deniability. They can always claim it's just a troll. And then he said something, I think, in regards to the movement, the Groypers or whatever they call themselves these days. Like, they should go underground. They should not exactly always say who they are, infiltrate the government, infiltrate everything, and then what exactly? That's kind of the big thing. Yeah, but how and in what way and what system would they see? This is the biggest problem that the communists obviously had back in the day of the original communist revolution. They couldn't make use of these Russians because they were peasants for 1,400 or 1,500 years or more. They were just peasants. A very rowdy crowd, lots of alcoholism, rampant alcoholism, and just all this oppression for so long made these people very difficult. And it's, of course, when you have a traditional system, the small aristocracy like in Russia in the past, you have to use these divide and conquer tactics against the general population. You have to make them suspicious of each other and make it so they're not really compatible with each other. Same in Germany. This was kind of the thing for I don't know, 2,000 years or whatever or more. I mean, even back when the German or Germanic tribes were around and started to either mingle with the Romans or to fight against the Romans, defend against the Romans, those Germans, they hated each other. All these tribes, they just grew and they fought each other, and again and again and again. You couldn't make use of them. And this is a general problem that's also kind of the case with a certain percentage of people in modern countries, Western republics. it's still kind of this thing where they can't really work with each other. It's going to take hours, days, weeks until they start having animosities and splintering again, and then have another group and another group, hate each other, fight each other. I mean, you can see this now with Candace Owens and Tucker and Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro. So this person is complaining against the other person, then they gang up on him. These people gang up on them, and it's like everybody's now the worst enemy, even though it's ridiculous. And these are even more professional people. I mean, Tucker Carlson has worked in mainstream media for a long, long time, and some of these others, they should be more diplomatic, right? And professional, or they could be.
Well, this is the bifurcations. Yeah, ideologies.
Nobody could spend time with Alex Jones. No woman could be married to him. No person could work with him for a longer time. It always ends badly. And so this is why it's so absurd.
Get away from him. Yeah,
it's so absurd when you think that Fuentes and Groypers, they could actually organize themselves to a degree when they get to a degree where they get power. They're absolutely, utterly incapable of doing so. I mean, this is like when
they're easily manipulated by people who understand their psychology.
If anybody doesn't have, let's say, management experience in their job history, when you have to manage 16 people or 20 people or 5 people, I mean, that's a hassle.
It's not easy.
If you have to manage all these different personalities within a certain boundaries. It's a hassle just with 10 people or 20 people. Imagine it's 100. Imagine it's 500. And so the idea, if you don't have this experience yourself, go make up a group on social media. Go say, okay, I'm a patriot, this, that, and the other. I'm going to make up this new group, and we distinguish ourselves a little bit, and we're fun, very trendy and, cool. And start to collect a few members. Watch what happens. Watch how little disagreements or underlying bigger agreements will turn into a disaster. This is what happens to the AfD party. Oh, did Fuentes tell that to his Groyper fans or the other guys, Tucker Carlson? Do they know? Do they explain what an utter train wreck the AfD party always has been in Germany? They're pretty serious in the polls right now, but nobody can really say who runs them more. The Russians, the Americans, the Brits, some other groups in Europe. Who's running them? It's a complete train wreck. And
but the leader of that party is a lesbian, right?
Yeah, a lesbian who loves China.
Who lived in China.
But these people in the party who hate her, they are forced to accept her. And there's networks within networks who can tell people and force people, apparently in the party, to accept a female lesbian leader who loves China, who worked in China for years in the past, and blah, blah, blah. They can make them do that, but sometimes that happened a lot when people in the party, years ago, when it wasn't completely bonkers, 100% bonkers, there was still some actual conservatives in the party, but those conservatives were considered the enemy. They got the most hate and problems and were sidelined and blindsided when it got to getting on the voter list, because we have this system where there's like a list of number 1 spot, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and depending on how many votes the party gets, more people from the list going from top to bottom get government or a parliamentary job. So the higher you are on the list, which is determined by weird methods, the bigger your probability of getting into actual not office, because they're not powerful enough yet, but you become a politician, a paid government member of parliament. So they hated each other. They fought each other the whole time. And it was always about this, oh no, you can't be a conservative. You have to be super hardcore. You have to prove that you are hardcore. You can't just make allusions to it. You have to say things, possibly on video, and and compromise yourself that way. Otherwise, you're not trusted by these shadowy networks, and then you cannot get anywhere in this party. We're gonna make your life hell, and you're gonna drop out. And maybe we'll tell some of your secrets to the government, and you put you under pressure. So because we hate you. Has Fuentes told his Groypers that this is their future? This is what's going to happen. Nothing but infighting and personal attacks.
That's what the Nazi Party was inside itself. It was a constant broil of. Yeah, people don't realize this. They think the Nazi Party was some kind of smooth operating machine. Hitler loved the chaos and the people crawling all over each other and fighting each other, because then they all had to come to him. That's what Hitler liked about it.
They shot each other. Going against the SA. This is like I think the example that most people will remember. I hope, because
Night
there's people.
Of the Long Nine.
Yeah, but there's people, self-professed Nazis on the internet who basically have very little knowledge of history, with the Nazis. Not even basic stuff. But they think it was this monolithic brotherhood, everybody working towards the same goal. They hated them. They hated each other all the way up to the very end. Fighting for the spots, weird assassinations. Who was inside Hitler's group, getting to be with him on those long walks that he used to take, and movie night before the war started. Hitler loved movie nights. He had a movie theater in his famous Berghof. They had a whole setup with a projection screen, a projector, and people running it, and a speaker system, watching all kinds of movies, even stuff that the population was not allowed to see. And it was movie night and then boring talks. Hitler saying the same old stories over and over again because he was afraid to sleep. He got these crazy nightmares. He didn't want to go to sleep. That's why he kept these people around him, and he kept talking just so he wouldn't have to go to sleep. And when you were in that group, you would be one of his favorites. If you were out of the group, somebody else could talk trash about you, and then Hitler would hate you, and this could have fatal consequences. This is the brotherhood back then. This is what you can expect in the future, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, when you listen to Nick Fuentes in the Tucker Carlson interview, you'll hear him say things that are absolutely self-contradictory. He contradicts himself. He's talking about group identity, Christian nationalism, identifying as this or that group. And yet, Tucker Carlson and him, oh no, we're against collectivism. And it's like, what?
Huh?
So Carlson this is a quote from the interview. Now, prior to this, Fuentes has said, I don't believe in the Holocaust. And he crudely compared Jewish victims of the Nazis to cookies baked in an oven. He said that. So it was odd then to hear Fuentes tell Carlson, I love all people, and we have to recognize that Aquinas says the Jews are a witness people. And then he says, try to wrap your head around this. Fuentes says, my disagreement is that Israel has nothing to do with Jewishness or the Jewish religion. Nothing to do with Jewishness?
What?
Israel has nothing to do with Jewishness? And he just comes out with these things.
Shouldn't he respect especially the conservative people in Israel? These heads of state that used to be super soldiers, special forces operators doing the operations, protecting the country against crazy Muslims, or super spies, running very meticulous actual physical operations, and a sense of traditionalism and order. Shouldn't he respect that by his own logic?
The anti-Semites that I spoke to the week before last, and I went on a radio show and debated the Holocaust with them and other issues, saying, you're all wrong about blaming the Jews for everything. This is not something you should do. They all agreed that Nick Fuentes was a white supremacist, or you can use the term white nationalist. So how is a white nationalist not a collectivist? How is that not collectivism?
Yeah, and isn't he part Mexican or something? I mean, he would. There was something. I did this. I wrote a bunch of tweets about him, like a week ago or something. And I think he's even partially Mexican or something. And there's a bunch of people, even like Candace Owens, they would not pass the Aryan test because they would test you and your family for your heritage, your genetics, essentially. And they would do this like 3 generations or something backwards, and they would give you a certificate when you pass the test. I don't think a lot of these people on the internet right now who are screaming these things, I don't think they would pass this test. Those Germans, I mean, my ancestors, those Germans would have, marked them, set a little tag, run the name and birth identification data, run it through these Hollerit punch card tabulating machines, and then mark them for a camp and just death. That's what the Germans did. So, am I missing something here? Is there some magic logic that I'm not getting, or is it like an anarchist thing where they think they're anarchists, but they still want control and power? Is it just an in the moment thing, a very narcissistic, I'm above logic thing? I mean, who cares at this point? It's just, what have they brought forward that gets us something? What is a new thing they've come up with? Have they built any bridges? Have they solved any issue? Have they made us stronger, better, smarter? Have they uncovered some actual secret operation? I mean, they make a lot of, Candace Owens goes crazy on the Kirk assassination, and apparently she knows everything. Apparently she knows everybody who was behind it and was on the ground, and some drones and operators and blah, 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 blah. And it was supposedly this big grand world conspiracy that's everywhere and can do everything except protect its own operations. So people on the internet have everything figured out within 5 minutes or within 1 day after something bad happens. Make sense of that. They always solve the case like within a day.
Woman in the Monty Python's Meaning of Life who turns towards the camera and says, "It's the Jews."
Yeah. Well,
and it was like, oh, where did that come from? But they touched on the craziness of making everything, the obsessiveness of the thing about Nazis that's so crazy is they're totally obsessed with Jews. What is this obsession?
I think because there's a mystique to it if people are not familiar with Jewish history, and all the things that Jews are more aware of. How they got backstabbed by the British Empire, because the British Empire, they liked their relationship with the Arab kingdoms, their relationships with the Arab kingdoms more. Backstabbing Jews so they couldn't escape. They couldn't really escape from Europe during the war. Just so many instances of backstabbing, even going back centuries. Taxing them to death. Special taxes for everything. Then you toss them out of the country, take all their stuff. Then you let them back into the country so you can tax them more. Rinse and repeat. So if people are not really familiar with history, they can get into they can get into the craziness, but it's like when you there's a certain mystique to Jewish people when you don't know the history, and especially there's some esoteric Jewish tradition like the Kabbalah that comes from a time when all of Mesopotamia did that kind of thing, or was into that, or curious about that. This was nothing particularly new. This was not something that Jewish people invented. But if you don't know anything really about it, or this Chabad group, it was totally infiltrated by the KGB in the Soviet Union. It was not the grand conspiracy inside the Soviet Union. It was just a group that tried to protect Jewish life, protect Jewish life in the Soviet Union, got totally infiltrated by the KGB. But there's still, to people who don't know all these things, there's a mystique to it. And when there's mystique, you can project into it. You can hide garbage ideas into it. And it's all very, airy-fairy and hard to grasp. Once you leave logic and clarity and rules, and this is what I hate most about Fuentes. I mean, he could say he's just a troll.
He leaves consistency behind.
He can say all these troll things and then say he didn't mean them. But what we can say for certain is he's trying to destroy logic and order, and a proper exchange and processing of information. As you just said, all the contradictory stuff, and it's just he's creating a situation where, and we did a whole episode on that maybe like a year ago, 2 years ago. If you destroy debating techniques, if you destroy logic, chaos will happen and violence will happen.
And what happens is you have an unintentionally ironic discourse, which is kind of funny. And it's just this rabble-rousing mix of undigested topics, self-contradiction and absurdity. And it's served up by Tucker Carlson to 17 million people. And Fuentes, he's on his way to being a household name if he isn't one already. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts defended Carlson's interview with Fuentes, saying that criticizing Israel is not the same thing as anti-Semitism, which is sort of the trope that's now given out. And okay, but isn't Fuentes a white nationalist who celebrates Stalin's birthday and thinks Hitler's cool? And so there was an uprising in Heritage Foundation. Sort of a rebellion behind the scenes. And of course, Fuentes has said, look, all I want is revenge against my enemies and a total Aryan victory. This is from a guy whose father's half Mexican, right? So it's got to be admitted that Carlson has platformed a basic Nazi sympathizer while receiving support from the Heritage Foundation, which is supposed to be very American. And so under pressure, Roberts of the Heritage Foundation gave the following statement. He said, so it's as kind of an apologia, right? Nick Fuentes' anti-Semitism is not complicated, ironic, or misunderstood. It is explicit, dangerous, and demands our unified opposition as conservatives. Fuentes knows exactly what he is doing. He is fomenting Jew hatred, and his incitements are not only immoral and unchristian, they risk violence. For those, especially young men, who are enticed by Fuentes, there is a better way, unquote. But he wouldn't criticize Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is supported, I believe, financially by the Heritage Foundation. Of course, I've always thought the Heritage Foundation stinks. They won't talk about Gallitzin. They won't stick their neck out for anything. They won't really study anything. These are people who have PhDs out of nothing. I don't know, or what their degrees are in. Roberts added that Fuentes should not be canceled. He argued that he should not be canceled. Look, you've got a problem with this rising National Socialism, folks, because it is a toxin. Fuentes is a toxic dwarf, the same way that Goebbels was a toxic dwarf, right? The little doctor, Goebbels.
What has Fuentes ever really created? I mean, people can lead very different lives. I mean, they have traditional families and they have 5 kids, but you don't need to have that. You don't need to do that. And some people who have these families, they're quite bad at family life. But there's many different ways that people can prove themselves, whether it's in a family or it's in a job. There's what we talked about in a previous episode, the ability and the willingness to grind, to improve things for other people, and to be diplomatic even when it's tough, even when you're under stress. What has this Fuentes guy created? What has this Fuentes guy created? And this is kind of the biggest problem. I think that these entitled people have, like Fuentes and even Tucker. They want to be the guy. They want to be the man. And even with the Germans in recent years, you know, these a lot of these AFD people and other people, some of them, they want to be the one. They want to be the chosen one, the person foreseen by Providence, and everybody admires them and everybody loves them and they have all the power and they can say what goes. But none of them fit the bill, even in a stupid way, even in a most basic misguided way. None of them fit the bill, because one of the guys has been a school teacher. And the German school system is the most conservative, bland, boring school system you can imagine. And it's like, if you're a school teacher, you have a special status, you work for the government, and it has all kinds of benefits, and you basically can never be fired, and you have tax privileges and everything. So, but you have to be with the system. You can never say anything against the system, otherwise you lose those privileges. So it's very boring and stiff. And so one of these guys, he wants to be the one, but he doesn't fit the bill. Nobody really respects him, because every competitor thinks, well, I can do the same thing. I can say the same thing. I have the same books in my bookshelf. I have seen the same videos on the outskirts of the internet. Why him? Why not me? And so this goes on and on and on. It's like Candace Owens. Does Candace Owens really think she can be the one? She will be hailed by everybody, by the white power movement and the conspiracy buffs? No. Fuentes? People really want to see Fuentes as some kind of Führer? No. Carlson, with his dopey eyes and his non-intellectual way of doing things? No. He's not, I mean, he's not a war veteran, I think. Hope I'm not missing anything here.
No.
I mean, Hitler, and I have this in my piece on counterintel.com, you know, the latest studies about Hitler serving in World War I, and you know, his how the comrades thought he was such a weirdo, well, they didn't say autistic, but that's kind of how they describe him. This is what now the genetic analysis seems to confirm. Kind of autistic, kind of a bit schizo, weird. They called him der närrische Adolf, or narrische Adolf. That means kind of like a crazy weirdo type. And they said if he was stuck somewhere with a bunch of canned food, he would starve, because he was so inept and weird and dumb, he could not improvise to open a can of food. And so he was, according to some comrades in the unit that he was serving, he was caught in the hay with a fellow soldier, which was apparently ignored. He saw one significant battle, and within seconds, there was just a hailstorm of gunfire and machine gun fire. So as far as we can reconstruct, and other people have reconstructed this, and unit commanders and everything, as far as we can tell, first real battle, Hitler and anybody who was still standing, they ducked into a hole in the ground, a corner, and waited for this thing to be over. And then Hitler was transferred to behind the front line. And he was a Meldegänger. He was supposed to hand deliver messages from point A to point B. Now, some of these Meldegängers were right at the front most of the time, or all the time, which was a very dangerous job. Hitler spent most of his time in a safe distance away from the front. And only occasionally would he do a dangerous mission. And for some reasons, this is kind of unclear. For some reasons, he was awarded with the Iron Cross First Class, and he kept wearing it throughout his political career. He was standing.
The claim was that he captured some British soldiers with a pistol. He bluffed them into surrendering. That's the story.
And people at the time thought he was just in tight with some of the commanders, and this is where you got preferential treatment, and he would rather get the decorations rather than somebody else. But he kept wearing it. This was his badge of honor. He was wearing it next to actual generals, pretending to be the same or equal or better. But at least he had that for his personality cult. He served in the Great War, and he would never really go into detail what he did in the war. And then later, some of the reports from his comrades were falsified. They were, scared into submission and bribed to tell a different story, how great Hitler was and how political he was, even though he was apparently not very political in the First World War. That happened afterwards. He got into this ideology. He was a loser. He had nothing, and he was nothing, but he got into with powerful networks and circles and rose up the ranks. And they systematically destroyed conservatism. These beat up kids or former kids from the war, they wanted to run it all, but they had never run anything. So people started to wonder back then in World War I, why didn't Hitler ever really get a promotion? Why didn't he start to lead people, get to a certain military rank where you can command people and they would trust you and you would please your superiors? He didn't have that. He was not leading people. Nobody was really following him, right? He needed the craziness. He needed the mass movement. He needed the money from various places, help from abroad. Otherwise, this would not have worked. So, in essence, American conservatism has always been a coalition. You had the libertarians, traditionalists, religious people, and even populists, business elites, national security hawks, as they are called, and localist federalist. For most of the post-war
that's a good
period,
description of American conservatism. There's a hodgepodge of those things.
Yeah, for most of the post-war period, that coalition functioned under a fusionist peace: low taxes and limited government for libertarians, anti-communism and social order for traditionalists, strong defense for hawks, constitutionalism for everyone. That peace required boundary maintenance, explicit excommunication of extremist factions, and a shared rhetoric of constitutional loyalty. Today, those boundaries are porous, and the right contains unresolved, often explosive disagreements on these principles: how Hitler and the Nazis are viewed, what to make of the Jewish conspiracy mythology, preference for a free republic versus an authoritarian state, women's rights, social roles, white power ideology versus a pluralist civic nationalism. And these disputes are not merely academic. They shape candidate selection, media incentives, donor strategies, and the movement's moral credibility. They have weakened conservatism by splintering its audiences, sabotaging persuasion, and corroding institutional trust within the coalition itself. And this essay maps each fault line, reconstructs the internal debates, and explains why the discourse has often been unproductive or dysfunctional, producing mutual delegitimations and a politics of permanent crisis. So, you had.
Well, let me make a little comment about a little run through American political history. You had the American Revolution, the Founding Fathers, and you had the Articles of Confederation was the first form of federal government in which the states were really almost like their own countries. They had their own ambassadors. You had this big debt from the American Revolution, and it wasn't working. And so they had the Constitutional Convention, the Federalists, and of course, read the Federalist Papers to understand the Constitution. They argued for it. A new Constitution was framed. In 1787 was the Constitutional Convention. 1789, the new government began. The states ratified it. And George Washington was sworn in as the first president of the United States. The Federalist Party was the party of the founding fathers of, Hamilton, Washington, Madison, at first. And of course, Jefferson was the first Secretary of State. And of course, what happened, the two first presidents were Federalists, Washington and Adams, but Jefferson formed the Democratic Republican Party, which ultimately became the Democratic Party. And he challenged Adams in 1800 election, and won the election. And of course, the Federalist died its death then. And what you had is the Whig Party came up after that. And the Democrats dominated, especially because the South really supported the Democratic Party. I mean, Virginia was the largest state in population at the time. And most of our early presidents were Virginians. Washington was a Virginian, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, they were all Virginians. And of course, you had John Quincy Adams, who was Secretary of State under James Monroe. But the Whig Party started to die, and the big division in the country was between the South with its slavery, the slave states, and the North. And there was this tension that developed because in the original Constitution, the slave trade was to end in, what was it, 1809 or 1811, I forget, and they weren't going to import any more African slaves, but they were still breeding them. And this Southern aristocracy started saying, we don't think we want to get rid of slavery. And they really dominated Southerners because of their sophistication, some of their leaders. They dominated the government. You'll see a lot of Southerners elected president, or you had the South was dominant in the Senate. And then when the Mexican War happened, California entered the Union as a free state, not as a slave state, and that tipped the balance. And as the South got more and more nervous that more states were going to be non-slave states, they wanted the territories to be open, to bring slaves in, to have more states, to have more senators. This is where Lincoln comes in, and the Republican Party begins to displace. The Whig Party is no more, and the Republican Party, it's northern. It has more electoral votes. In the election of 1856, they did not win. But in 1860 they did, inevitably, because they could carry all the northern states with more electoral votes. And so the South seceded from the Union, and the Civil War happened. And of course, the Civil War was decisive because the North won. The Democratic Party only existed in some major cities in the North, like New York, and where you had a lot of immigrants from certain places come in, and they could control the political machines in some of the cities. And of course in the South. And it was the Democratic Party. They only won elections for the rest of the 19th century. It was Grover Cleveland was the only Democrat to get elected. And the first Southerner to get elected president was Woodrow Wilson when the Republican Party split in the election of 1912. So that's how you get a Democrat and a Southerner back in the White House. And of course, because Taft and Teddy Roosevelt went at each other, and the Bull Moose Party formed. So that is kind of the Republicans were so dominant, and the North, with its industrialization and its huge Republican majorities. But then you had the Great Depression, and you elected a Democrat again after a decade of Republicans dominating once again. And of course, what happened is Franklin Roosevelt had a coalition of the South and the large cities in the North, and the people who were dissatisfied thought the Republican Party and Herbert Hoover had failed the country. And of course, this became a vehicle for the New Dealers, for people who were basically socialists, wanted to make America like either like Benito Mussolini's Italy or like the Soviet Union. They were going to make the United States like this. And of course, World War II happened. And after World War II, there was a reaction against the New Dealers. A move towards let's go back to free enterprise. The Republicans briefly retook the House and the Senate, and you had Eisenhower as president, but it was very evenly split. So in 1960, you had this very close election between Nixon and John F. Kennedy. But of course, as things went on, as civil rights went on, the South switched from being Democrat, because the Democrats, President Johnson, LBJ, another Southerner, had gone in for the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, And of course, this and then opening the country to a different kind of immigration. Immigration policies were rather restrictive before that. And of course, this was all to expand a new concept of the Democratic Party, which was much more to the left, much more to the liking of the New Dealers. The former communists who'd been purged from the government in the 1950s were flooding back mainly into the Democratic Party. This is where you got the Democrat Party moving further to the left. And then you had this very strong right-left divide emerging in American politics. And of course, you had Ronald Reagan, who brought things back to anti-communism and conservatism and was rather successful. And then you had the fall of the Soviet Union, which completely confused everything. Yeah. The old conservative anti-communist thing sort of just became irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so now you have this opening for these national socialists. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like isn't it the case that all these different factions within the right have become more extreme and crazy? I mean, even the post-war Buckleyite types, you know, they are viewed. And I think this is not just an illusion. They're kind of viewed as just serving their own interests and business interests. And these high-level, powerful conservatives, they're all married to each other and they have houses in the Hamptons and they're just have all this money and they seem to protect their own interests. And it's like when you get the new breed, the tech bros, Elon Musk and the people from Palantir, they seem quite extreme because they say they're for America, but I don't know. It seems a bit they seem a bit full of themselves, and it seems extreme. Then you got the religious conservatives. Some of them have become crazy, or they were crazy quite a long time ago. These televangelists, totally nuts. Then the libertarians, more and more libertarians have been radicalized. With this Ron Paul stuff, pro-Russian stuff.
Libertarians are susceptible to embracing the old Confederacy.
Yeah, and it's like
embracing
all government
the
is
National
evil.
Socialist. Yeah. It's
all
weird.
Government is evil. We need 0% government, and we need to be angry.
These libertarians, often you find libertarians converting to a kind of, wink, wink, maybe Hitler was right kind of thing. Like Greg Johnson is an example. He was a libertarian who converted to a kind of, he does the countercurrent thing. I believe he's gay, if I remember correctly, which is another thing that we find in this is this. And then you have now Nick Fuentes claims in the interview that he started out as a libertarian. And of course, we see this also with the Dark Enlightenment movement. They're appealing to these tech people or libertarians. So there's something morally unhinged.
Yeah.
There's some kind of moral idiocy with the libertarian
we talked
right.
about we talked to in a previous episode. We talked about the tech bros and Elon Musk's. I think it was his grandfather who moved from Canada. I think it was his grandfather who moved from Canada to South Africa because there was, white power, because of the white power mentality and apartheid and the traditional conspiracy ideology. He even put out conspiracy books, and he got into trouble. The grandfather, if I remember correctly, he got into trouble in Canada because he was part of this larger group organization that was technocratic. They wanted a society ruled by scientists, assigning people budgets at birth, resources and certain liberties at birth, and reevaluating them, and just scientists run it all.
A brave new world.
And it sounded kind of left, but it was also, the guy was, at least Elon's grandfather was very extremist right, so it's almost like National Socialism, because when you dissect the writings of that technocratic group, they said, it's like bureaucrats essentially, or scientists and bureaucrats. They will govern everything, and they will decide everything, and they will make up these plans how to use resources and assign things to people at birth even. So craziness. With the libertarians, the Ron Paul stuff, I mean, he became famous like in the 2000s, in the Bush era, for opposing the neoconservatives, who also went a bit crazy, or more than a bit crazy. and he would get all the sympathy and say, America shouldn't have foreign military bases, even though that's important. And a lot of these bases are not very big. It's not like they're
we
terrorizing.
wouldn't survive. We wouldn't survive without them.
It's not like you can terrorize all these countries with these little military bases. And it's like he gathered all the sympathies, and people hated paying all these taxes, and the banks and the big banks and the bailouts, and so he got all these angry people, and the well-meaning people behind him, fueled by Alex Jones, and that was a big debate back then. I remember this still when Jones gave Alex Jones, when he was still masking or masquerading himself as a libertarian constitutionalist, not classic right, not left, wanted to build bridges for people. He was pushing with his platform Ron Paul to a high degree, so many people knew who Ron Paul was, donated money to his presidential campaigns, actually got a lot of donations. But then there was a fraction there was this tension between the people working for Ron Paul, and I think one of these guys got into trouble for money from Russia, if I remember correctly, that wasn't used right or labeled right or misused or something. Wasn't this Benton? Wasn't he called Benton? It was like there's people can find this on the web, and I'm just going off from memory. It's been a long time, and so these campaign managers of Ron Paul, they started to look beyond and say, okay, we got all these truthers and libertarians and these kids and people who used to be on the left and everybody, and people who were conservatives who were fed up with the Bush admin. But now we want to have a bigger spectrum. We don't want to be nailed down to this truther stuff. Predominantly, we just don't want to have all these so many interviews with Alex Jones. Then Ron Paul was kind of shielded from Alex Jones. Alex Jones was getting angry. This was back then, right? This was tension back then. They couldn't work with each other. Then, of course, neoconservatives going kind of insane, the Bush era. And, of course, the Russians would use all that anger. The Russians, they started, even when 9/11 happened, I think the moment 9/11 happened, the Russians and their assets, the Russians, they started this disinformation campaign. They wanted to run the 9/11 truth movement and influence it and say the Russia is better. Russia is so much better than the Bush admin. Russia is kind of looking nice compared to the Condoleezza Rice and Powell and Rumsfeld and all these people and Dick Cheney. So that went crazy. Then you have paleo conservatives, national conservatives, populist right, and then the alt-right, explicit white nationalists. So everybody was trying to outdo each other, and everybody was becoming somewhat crazy, and everybody had this debating style. I'm always right, and I'm going to use every stupid debate trick that exists, even though there's only two real debating techniques. It's either facts, actual data, and then logic, actual logic. That's it. Everything else is just fluff. Everything else is just personal attacks and circular reasoning and roundabouts and just stupidity. So when it comes to this, so this was like the spectrum. Then this big fault line, this big breakup within the right. The topic: how Hitler and the Nazis are viewed. Memory wars on the right. From the 1950s onward, the mainstream right defined itself against totalitarianism, communist and fascist. William F. Buckley Jr. Famously policed the boundaries, ostracizing the John Birch Society for paranoid conspiracism and rejecting any apologias for fascism. This Buckley rule did not only exclude Nazism as a moral abomination, it treated fascist methods, the cult of the leader, paramilitary politics, and ethnicized citizenship as incompatible with the American constitutional inheritance. Now, of course, Buckley made horrendous mistakes that still have horrendous consequences to this day. But at least he got that right.
There was this positive aspect to Buckley. I will say this. Look, Buckley was trying with National Review to create a coherent he basically, even though they claimed, people like Russell Kirk, they claimed that conservatism was not an ideology. But what they did is they basically formed an ideology, because when you create these boundaries, when you create a kind of a doctrine, which is what Buckley sort of did with the circle he created around National Review, you're creating a movement. You're creating an ideology for the Republican right, and ultimately took power with Reagan. It took them a long time, but yes, they policed the anti-Semites. They policed the Birch Society. No, that's conspiracy crazy. Of course, Buckley knew that Robert Welch was really a closet anti-Semite. This had been exposed by the B'nai B'rith and the Anti-Defamation League, and it all turned out to be true. The Jewish investigators were not making it up. Welch really was a closet anti-Semite. Revlo Oliver exposed it. His friend Revlo Oliver exposed it in his memoirs in the 1960s. So Buckley, it was a positive thing. Buckley also supported and was a friend of Senator Joe McCarthy, but seeing how bruised McCarthy was, he even criticized McCarthy because he wanted so desperately for conservatism to be respectable and accepted. And of course, Eric Voegelin, they wanted to include him at one point in a list of famous conservatives, and he refused. And he said, I am not a leftist, and of course, I am not going to be conservative. In other words, I'm not going to be part of an ideology. I'm looking for the truth. I'm a scholar. I'm not an ideologist. And this is the problem with ideology, why it's a mistake. When you create this, it had its good effects for a while, but it's not actually, they're not really thinking. They're following by rote. They're following a formula. And people who live by a formula, even if it's a fairly good formula, they're not really living in reality. So when the Soviet Union, when the communists looked at this and said, what's going to happen to these conservatives, these Buckleyites, when the Soviet Union collapses, when Gorbachev's reforms begin, they're going to believe it and they're going to declare victory, and they're going to be easy to manipulate, because people who believe things, they have a mark over their head saying, I will do this because I believe that. And they're not living in real life, real-time events, thinking about things as they're going on. They're going to always fall into a trap. And so conservatism hit the wall with Gorbachev. You had it dividing into paleocons and neocons, libertarians and religious conservatives, and it, as you described, it fragmented. And they all really despise each other when you get down to it. When you talk to some of these people around Buckley, I've talked to some of them in the years following, and it wasn't something that could be held together. And so you could only have Republican presidents who really weren't part of this, like George W. Bush was never. He kind of drifted into the religious conservative thing, but you didn't. He wasn't coherent, and it reflected a very unstable coalition, and then of course you had Trump emerge. And Trump is a completely new phenomenon, because Trump has elements of the paleocons, elements of the libertarians, elements of compromising with the welfare state. He is completely something different, and in fact more amenable to things like Fuentes, for things like what happened at in Virginia. What was it? It wasn't Charlottesville. Was that what it was? Where you had these neo-Confederates and neo-Nazis getting together, and it's.
Wasn't it called Unite the Right? I mean, it created so much more tension among the right wing, but it was called Unite the Right.
And you had Ron Paul and Rand Paul. Ron Paul did these anti-Lincoln things, and there was a anti-North, anti-Civil War, pro-South, and they would say things like the Civil War was not about slavery. It's complete bunk. The Confederate leaders said it was about slavery. The Confederate leaders said that the South, the cornerstone speech of Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, go read it, it's online. He said that the founding fathers were wrong. It's not about freedom. that the South realizes that it's wrong, and the South is based on black African chattel slavery and white supremacy. That was the ideology of the South. And I'm sorry, but this myth about the South that has grown up around some of these people, and of course, Ron Paul is a Southerner. Was a Texan Republican. Rand Paul, of course, is from Kentucky, a Southern state. So you see that this is a part of our background to actually lie about the history of the United States.
Wasn't there some? This was like in 2008, and then I think again in 2012 when Ron Paul was quote unquote running for president. I mean, he kept telling that to his followers and donors, and Alex Jones at InfoWars was telling it to his audience. Yeah, he's for real. He really wants to, aim for the nomination and become president and save us all. But then it was, the first thing got traction. I mean, the 2008 campaign of Ron Paul was serious. This was not just people saying, yeah, I'm going to give him $20 and he's going to be on television for a bit. This actually got massive traction because people wanted something else, and they wanted what was promised, but Ron Paul was not really what was promised to them. It was kind of serious. And then in 2012, next Ron Paul campaign, more money, more organization, more people willing to go door to door and organize these things. And then they pulled the plug. The campaign itself pulled the plug on itself. They stopped putting in money and effort into the super states like California and even Texas, like the home state. And all these followers, all these campaign people are saying, what in the world is going on? And then they got some slimy guy from the campaign who made a video when the campaign was more or less aborted. And this little sleazebag guy, he said something like, yeah, let me explain this to you dumbos out there. If you're angry about this, then you're stupid. And he explained this thing. We have this master plan. We don't want to upset the party right now. So we didn't really have Ron Paul run for real. It was more about us taking over the party in the following years, with Rand Paul, the son, and the movement and the traction we got. We're going to infiltrate the party, and then we're going to own the party, and then we can make whatever change we want. Of course, complete wishful thinking, ludicrous stuff. People started literally burning their Ron Paul t-shirts. And Alex Jones was floored. He got massive backlash. His own followers were angry at him. Did he know about this? That would have been, of course, terrible. Did he not know about this? This would also be terrible because then he would support something that he doesn't really understand. Massive problems. As I said, these people cannot work with each other. There's no honesty. There's no clarity. There's these blind sides, and they treat followers and supporters like dogs, just using them, then blindsiding them, getting Rand Paul into his cushy, politician job, and make the family rich, and just giving people some slogans. And then of course. This was then the revisionist temptation. Even within respectable conservatism, some voices re-interrogated the Second World War settlement. Was interwar liberalism decadent? Did Allied bombing or denazification go too far? Were post-war trials victor's justice? Most of these arguments stopped short of Nazi rehabilitation, but they sometimes softened the unique criminality of Nazism, framing it as one more European illiberalism among many. Critics warned that such revisionism provided cover for more radical actors. And then, of course, giving the left more to work with, because the left, the left always needs this craziness. And if the craziness isn't there enough, communist agents, subversion agents, they will actually create more chaos and support crazy fascists and give out the impression that the left has to save the world and fight this right-wing world conspiracy. Then, of course, the alt-right and the dysfunctional debate patterns, like the bad faith equivocations. Some nationalist influencers dismiss Nazi comparisons as hysteria, then they wink at Nazi-adjacent memes to keep a radical audience engaged. Plausible deniability is a strategy. Overreach and label inflation. Some mainstream actors brand any stringent nationalism as Nazi, collapsing distinctions and radicalizing the very audiences they hope to shame. And algorithmic escalation. Social platforms reward extremity. Creators drift towards edgy riffs that blur moral red lines. The result, reputational damage.
Let's hold on a second. Let's talk about this for a second. This is the thing that really troubles me, is this statement that criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Yeah, that is, of course, true if that's all it is. But the problem is that these people who are doing it, when you look into their background, you find out they're doing things like they believe that 9/11 was done by Mossad. They have Holocaust denial, historical revisionism in their thinking. It peeks out here and there, like Nick Fuentes. If you say, well, Nick Fuentes is not anti-Semitic because he's just criticizing Israel, or Candace Owens denying this. When you have to be very careful. Yeah, criticism of Israel is perfectly legitimate, but then people can be. When I hear somebody saying, "Oh, the Gaza, the Israelis are slaughtering the Gazans, and it's horrible, and we have to do something about it," it's like, that's a war over there. Both sides, the terrorists and the Israelis, are killing people. In World War II, both sides were killing civilians, and both sides did bad things. Why are you harping on Israel? And then you find out they don't think an airplane hit the Twin Towers. They start talking about building number 7. Next thing you know, they're talking about they're always talking about Jews, and then they'll say, well, the Holocaust didn't happen. Let's say it's true. We don't know the exact numbers of people that died. Let's say it's less than 6 million. Could be more, right? Less than 6 million. Let's say it's less than 6 million people. Does that make the crime any different? And you can't. I remember a Danish friend of mine who suddenly I found out he believed in this, and I brought up the Himmler-Posen speech, and he just denied that the tape recording was real. And we have testimony of people who were there. It isn't only the tape. And how do you fake the tape anyway? It's been forensically demonstrated.
Yeah,
and then what about
the whole bureaucratic mountain of organization that's still there? I mean, they tried to hide and burn some more of the top level documents. But they couldn't destroy the mountain of bureaucratic evidence and all the backstory.
And then you've got Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann, there was a Dutch former SS officer who also fled to Argentina, who in 1957, before Eichmann was kidnapped by Mossad and taken to Israel for trial, he did 15 hours of taped interviews with Eichmann because he wanted to write a book about Eichmann, about what happened. And of course, the Israelis got a 700-page transcript from this. And of course, pretty soon that tape's going to appear online, the actual recording of Eichmann. But there's Eichmann's recordings during his trial. Look, what was Adolf Eichmann's defense? It wasn't the Holocaust didn't happen. This is all nonsense. He could have said that if he believed that, but he didn't. He said publicly, that basically Reinhard Heydrich told him that the order to eradicate the Jews, to eliminate them, to wipe them out, to exterminate them, came to Heydrich from Hitler. And that's all he
also
knew. That's where the order came.
The whole reasoning behind the Holocaust, underlining the Holocaust, the whole reasoning for the Holocaust, that reasoning was even older than the NSDAP. We have mountains of history on how this thing developed in the right wing in a big way, starting in like roundabout 1850. And it became bigger, and it became bigger, and it became bigger, and then it became international and more international, and it became really, really, really big. It was one of the biggest things, actually, even before the First World War. Then it became even bigger. Then the Nazis used it and adopted it. And this logic was that Jews supposedly had this these very unique characteristics that were baked into them, like genetic, hard-coded attributes these attributes would make them conspire against any traditional empire, any Roman-style empire, and they would always destroy these empires, no matter how much you put them into ghettos, how much you limit their movements and what jobs they can have, and how much you tax them.
And notice how that's really anti-Christian.
Yeah. And so this whole logic was that everything else had been tried. Anything else but total annihilation had been tried, and it always failed. Just ghettos and pushing them out of a country and then maybe letting them back in, or they go to another European country. All of that, according to Nazi logic, had failed. So Jewish power was on the rise, they said, even though it was, Britain was still Britain, and other countries were still these other countries. But they said time is of the essence. Everything else failed, so there's only total annihilation, and that would solve the problem forever. Hence, Roman empires, or a new sick, crazy psycho version of a Roman empire, like the Nazi empire, that could flourish, and it would never fail because no more Jews. Right? Because the only reason these traditional empires failed, according to Nazi logic, the only really real reason was Jews. So you take Jews out of the equation, or out of this world, bingo, no more problems, real problems or existential problems for traditional empires. So this whole logic was there. It was there for many generations, actually, even before the Nazis took it on. And a lot of Jews were, or let's say, German Jews or Jewish Germans, they were shot. A lot of them were shot. A lot of them were starved or left to die from diseases. It was not all about gassing in camps. There was a lot of shooting.
You starved people. Look, the ghettos were crowded and unsanitary, so a lot of Jews died of illnesses.
And people, even especially the right wingers,
crowded into. Yeah.
Especially the right wingers, should actually know that ammunition is kind of cheap. Especially the most popular, the 9mm. It's called the Luger. Call it Para. We call it. In Germany nowadays, we call it. We refer to the caliber as not just as 9mm, but we call it either Para, from the old saying. If you want peace, prepare for war. We call it Para, or we still call it Luger. Just like the Luger pistol. It was still, it was cheap. And right-wingers who are familiar with firearms, they should understand that a little box of ammo, tiny little box of ammo is 50 bullets. I explained that to one of my kids once when they were playing some video game. And it was really hard to get ammunition. You always got like a few little bullets here and there. And I said, do you know what 50 bullets actually is? It was like, because in the game, the character could only carry a few bullets of any specific type, which made no sense. And I said this is a little box with 50 bullets. And, to get back to the Holocaust topic, 50 bullets is 50 dead people, right? 50 bullets cost nothing, and it's 50 people. And stack them up, 500
the
bullets,
Einsatz group
5,000
going
bullets,
around, yeah.
5,000 bullets, and just like, what's 5,000 bullets, or what's 1,000,000 bullets? What's 500,000
The
bullets?
reason that method of killing, though, was ended up being counterproductive because
the soldiers got bonkers. Yeah,
the soldiers the killing was actually psychologically damaging to the soldiers, and you would have soldiers running away. You would have suicides. You would have, because you're killing women and children. This goes against human nature. This goes against things in our hearts. And so we have to do this in a different way. This is when the gas vans appeared, and then they started looking at Zyklon B. But the denial, Holocaust denial, people say, well, why would Hitler kill the Jews? If you go to the tape recording of the transcript of the Eichmann a testimony in 1957 that he gave to his Dutch SS friend, the Dutch journalist, Eichmann said, look, the order was, if the Jew can work, we're going to use him as slave labor. But if we can't get any work out of him, it's the final solution, period. We're going to kill them. And of course, this is called special treatment. This was the euphemism they used, or evacuation to the east. They would say, where are these Jews going? We're evacuating to the east. They put them in ghettos, and they used places like Treblinka, a transit camp, to kill people. We know about that because there was a revolt at the camp, and I think 80 to 100 of the inmates escaped at the very end before they could be killed. They realized how it was going to work. But the testimony, look, Eichmann uses the number 10.3 million. Now, I don't think he knew how many they killed. Eichmann was the guy that made the train schedules to move the Jews to the camps, to the various camps, for labor and for special treatment. And I'm not sure he knew. There were, by some accounts, there were 17 million Jews in the world, and I don't know, 1920, I'm not sure, 1930. Most of them located in Europe, I think. So how many Jews were killed? We don't know. How many died from typhus and disease because of the terrible conditions and the starvation that was imposed on them? Yeah. How many died of bullets? How many died in gas vans and Zyklon B?
Or hiding in the woods and
we don't
starving.
know the exact numbers, but the idea is you take all the Jews from all of Europe. And, I read Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem. They went from country to country, give us all our Jews, ship them out. France, Belgium, Hungary. Only a few countries resisted giving the Jews. The Danes helped their Jews escape to Sweden. The Italians initially refused under Mussolini, because Spain wasn't occupied. Franco absolutely refused. Franco was a quarter Jewish. He absolutely refused. Bulgaria refused. There were countries that refused to hand over the Jews. Other countries did not. The Romanians spontaneously had a pogrom against the Jews that even horrified the Nazis. No, you don't do it that way. You don't make it just open in public, slaughtering Jews in the open. They wanted it clean, antiseptic. They wanted to be able to put a nice ribbon on it. And this is quite clear. And we have the transcript of the Wannsee conference.
The paranoia about Jews going underground and just becoming invisible to the government, because when Jews or German Jews or Jewish Germans, when they started to look like everybody else or look more like everybody else, and they married non-Jewish people and whatever, or not even practicing the religion anymore. This terrified the Nazis because they thought they were losing track of them. How do you find them if the records don't actually tell you who's partially Jewish or not? And this was even the wording itself, the final solution, Endlösung der Judenfrage. The end goal was not even just kill. The end goal was way more than just killing the Jews. It was solving the problem, finally, forever, in perpetuity, solving the problem, the core problem of every traditional Roman-style empire or crazy Roman-style empire. That was the ultimate goal. Killing the Jews was the means to that end. It was not just about killing the Jews; it was eradicating the problem that empires had for so long. And like when you look at the post-war period, I mean, it was not easy to be a Jew in various places in the world. I mean, you lost people, or you experienced the crazy escape. You lost people in the Holocaust. It's difficult for many people. And then, of course, the question of identity. Now you live in the new state of Israel, which was co-created by the British Empire and some weird aristocrats, weird connections. Then you got all these Soviet or Russian/Soviet Jews coming in. Some of them were assets and agents. And then, of course, the communist movement among Jewish people. Telling them, traditionalism, you can have a little bit of traditionalism, but you should also embrace communism. And this is, of course, where you get kind of some super left Jews nowadays. Of course, they exist. Like other people became communists too. But this is not the grand world conspiracy. This is just some Jewish people became communists, or even communist agents, communist assets of subversion. I mean, people have to distinguish that. And then even as a country or as a government, Israel is a complicated country. As I said, communist infiltration, Soviet infiltration. It's hard to create a country from scratch and have it free from communist infiltration and subversion. Then there's this whole British thing that I keep yapping about. These weird Brits who always want to steer things, but they have these aristocratic Brits. They have some weird backstories and weird connections, or had some weird connections to the Soviet Union and being compromised and all that. So if anybody nowadays goes on the internet, puts on his webcam and or types into his keyboard, if people start quote unquote criticizing Israel or the government and governments of Israel, they are essentially claiming that they are more competent, that even when they go about the past, the previous or even the previous Jewish government or that Jewish government or that Jewish government, they've fought the Palestinians and they've fought the Egypt and blah blah blah. When people say, I criticize that was horrible what the Israeli government did and the secret operations, essentially these commentators or influencers, pretend to be a lot more. They pretend to be a lot more competent in running a country. Are they more competent? Have they run anything? Have they been responsible for security and all these people? Have they made some of these tough choices? Do they know how this all works? No. But this is what so many people are nowadays are doing. They look at some event or some phase in Israel's history, and they basically claim, I would have done a much better job if I had run the Israeli government. With the 6 Day War or the Egypt and this, that, and the other, and the recent war with the Palestinians, I would have done a better job. Really? How? What? It's just like,
Yeah. I want to bring things back to the evidence that the people pushing this like Fuentes will ignore. And that is, Deanne Losinger Judenfrage, the final solution of the Jewish question. Go online and find the Himmler's October 1943 Posen speech. You will find it in German if you have a little bit of German to listen to it in German, or in English. It's been translated by AI. There's also other transcripts in English of the speech. You can read the whole thing. It's quite long. And so I'd like to give a little bit of what's in this speech. And look, if you can deny the evidence if you want, you can deny that we landed on the moon, or you can deny that anything in history, you can claim it didn't happen. But this is really documented. So in part of the speech, Himmler mentions the Jewish question. And of course, he says, everybody has a Jew that they like, and what are we going to do? And we can't do this game. But he says, he mentions the final solution. And he says, this is a quote from Himmler: "Among ourselves," he said, "it should be expressed once very candidly, even though we will never speak publicly about it. I mean now the Jewish evacuation, the extermination, Ausrottung, of the Jewish people." He then what Himmler says is, most of you know what it means when 100 corpses lie together, when 500 lie there, or when 1,000 lie there. This is a never written and never to be written page of glory in our history. Then he explained the reason that Jewish women and children had to be killed. Quote, "For I did not consider myself justified in exterminating the men and then allowing their children to grow up to wreak vengeance on our children and grandchildren. The difficult decision had to be taken to make these people disappear from the face of the earth. For the organization," he means the SS, "that had to carry out this duty, it was the most difficult that we have ever had to undertake." I mean, this is a flat admission that they were about exterminating the Jews. Flat admission. You can't unsee that once you have seen it. And his explanation is chillingly logical and bloodthirsty. He says elsewhere in the speech that, "I don't care what happens to Czechs or Russians. If Russian women are digging an anti-tank ditch and dying, I don't want a commander coming up to me saying, we're going to work these people to death. We're killing women and children." He said, "No, you're killing German soldiers if that ditch isn't dug." Yeah. We want to be humane. Germany is the first country in the world to be humane towards animals. Well, these human animals, we'd like to be humane to them, but if it means the loss of a German soldier, we're going to kill them. Basically, is what he says in the speech.
The whole thing about organizing a Holocaust is you need to have the data, the raw data, then you have to sort it and tabulate and process the data. You have to define the characteristics, what actually makes a Jew, how can we tell who's a Jew? What is a Jew for us? Even if you had like a Jewish grandfather, one Jewish grandfather, that makes you a Jew. That was defined. So how do you figure out in the hinterlands of Germany or other Poland and other places, how do you find that particular guy who had a Jewish grandfather or who is half Jewish or quarter Jewish? How do you find that guy? How do you identify that guy? You need to send out your people in advance, and that actually happened, and get as much data as you can. And then it was so much data that you could not process this data with traditional methods. Even if you had many humans doing this by hand, having these little cards, writing who is this, that, and the other, and then sorting it into different file cabinets, it would have needed a literal army of people doing that, and it would have still taken many, 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 many years to come up with a ready-made database. Okay, this is a Jew. He lives in this place. These are his identifying attributes. This is how we can identify him and find him. It would have taken forever. So what they had was these Hollerith slash, I think it was Dehomag and slash IBM, these punch card tabulating machines, sort of like a primitive computer. Some people are a bit older, they still remember these things when they were in use everywhere, in business and government, organizing train systems. They use these primitive computers, punch card tabulating machines, for everything, because modern computers were not ready for market yet, or they were just too expensive and too large. So they had this technology, and this is how they could tailor make specific machines for a specific purpose, like organizing the German train system, or finding Jews, in a particular area. So you would have the machine calculating, sorting out, okay, this is not a Jew according to our definition. This is a Jew, so this goes in that bin, that goes in this bin. This is how they did it, and it's like if you don't have anything serious planned, you wouldn't go to this effort. You wouldn't find every last Jew you can possibly find, it's just once you can convince people, no, it's all just hot air, it's all just fluff. Once you can convince people of that, then you can steer them and say, oh, let's replicate the Nazi government. Let's replicate the movement. Let's just do it again, do it better, and win this time. It's always the same thing. And it's what some people want to hear. And I always go back to that point. Reality most of the time is not how you want it to be. It's your job to really understand it, think into the future, plan accordingly, look at the past, come up with the best plan, and execute the plan. A lot of times it's not what you want it to be. And you just, if you make a serious mistake, if you misinterpret something because you like a certain viewpoint, you will start to make wrong decisions that will make you lose. And I keep telling that to people. Do you want to lose? Do you want to be on the trash heap of history? Do you want to mess up in a big way and be a loser and have nothing or be dead? You want that? It comes down to how we process information. Now, the post-war right's explicit stance, for the most part, treated anti-Semitic conspiracy theories as both false and morally repugnant. The movement's pro-Israel faction, Jewish conservative intellectuals, and Cold War alliances with Jewish communities reinforce this boundary. But then, despite the boundaries, subcultures from militia publications in the 1990s to contemporary online fora recycled the protocols of Zion narrative in modernized forms. The globalists, the cabal, the bankers, blah, blah, blah. Some influencers exploit coded language to signal hostility without explicit slurs. And of course, the different parts of the right wing, different factions, they reacted differently to it. Enforcing boundaries, making boundaries more porous, and it's like what's called a Mott and Bailey rhetoric. Broad critiques of global elites, retreat to specific Jewish blame in niche channels. When challenged, speakers revert to the motto of generic anti-elitism. They want to protect themselves. Then cynical platforming. Big tent organizers invite controversy merchants for clout, then plead ignorance when anti-Semitic riffs emerge, normalizing this discourse. And then purity spirals. Pro-Israel conservatives equate any criticism of specific Israeli policies with anti-Semitism. Then, of course, some people cry censorship, they harden, and some then drift even more toward actual conspiracism. So, result, erosion of coalition trust among the right. Jewish conservatives disengage, media and the general public conflate conservatism with bigotry. And, recruiting college-educated talent becomes harder. The college kids, they all turn left. So then, of course, the question of free republic versus authoritarian temptation, regime preference on the right. You mentioned this very important definition that was put out by the South, before or during the Civil War, saying or implying the founding fathers got it wrong. They were too nice. We should do it the old way.
Well, they believed in equality and freedom and for everybody. And here's the thing. Nick Fuentes is anti-American. National Socialism, anti-Semitism, they're anti-American. If you go to the Nazis, Hitler declared war on America. Nazism declared war on America, and its ideas are completely opposed to the freedom and the ideas of Hamilton, John Jay and George Washington, all of the founding fathers, the makers of our Constitution, these values, these Nazi ideas are completely against our own. We fought a civil war in this country to free the African slaves, to stop. The Constitution had the end of the slave trade in it. We were feeling our way in American history, and the thing is we have this in our background, and this was the American experiment. This is the American way, and the Nazis believed that America is some kind of Jewish puppet. This is their idea. It's not true. America is not a Jewish puppet. It has never been a Jewish puppet state. Just to believe that is anti-Semitism, and that's what the Nazis believed. That's to believe the same thing as Hitler believed. And what does Hitler do? Why did he kill the Jews? Why did he start slaughtering them when he had them in camps? One theory that I entertain is that he saw the Jews as hostages, and being the crazy anti-Semite he believed that the Jews controlled America and Great Britain.
Yeah, you could
the Jewish bankers ruled it. So he thought, well, I'm going to start killing the hostages, and then I'm going to make them make peace, or I'm going to kill all the hostages. Yeah. And when there was no reaction from Washington or London, because they are not controlled by the Jews, and they're like, he's killing Jews? Oh, that's too bad. But they're not going to make peace with them because of that. I think he was genuinely confused. And, I think that they wanted the Western governments to know. I think there's been some scandal saying, the Roosevelt administration, Churchill, they knew the Jews were being killed and they didn't do anything. Well, what could they do? Europe was under control of the Wehrmacht. They couldn't exactly rescue them. But I think the problem is that the Jews didn't control the West. It's a Nazi myth that America is some kind of Jewish state, that we're all controlled by Jewish bankers. It's nonsense. But that would explain why you get all the Jews in camps, and you put a gun up and you say, I'm going to start killing them. All right, I'm killing them now. And this is why some of the first news about the Holocaust was circulating in Switzerland. Right? And that there's news that this is how it got to the Roosevelt White House, that the Jews were being killed. This is where it came from. And in fact, Ribbentrop, in his testimony at Nuremberg, and you can look this up, they said, well, what did you know? And Ribbentrop said, well, I heard from a diplomat in Switzerland that we were mass killing Jews. And I forget what month or year it was. So Ribbentrop went to the Reichschancellery. Hitler happened to be there. And he went into Hitler's office and he says, what is this I hear about we're mass killing Jews? And according to Ribbentrop, at Nuremberg, Ribbentrop said, Hitler looked at him and said, mind your own business. Yeah. That's basically what Hitler told him when Ribbentrop confronted Hitler about mass killings of Jews. Hitler said, mind your own business. He didn't deny it. Right?
There's also a bit here on the website candorintel.com. It's called "Point Him East." Carol Quigley's account of how the Milner Roads network sidelined France and gambled on a German-Soviet collision. Now, this is kind of like a summary of what Quigley thought of what actually had happened. Just if people forgot about that, Carol Quigley was a very influential academic, wrote this huge book, Tragedy and Hope, and the real highlight comes at the very end. Most people never actually read that. But then he also wrote a different book. It's called The Anglo-American Establishment. It's a really boring, generic title, but this book is kind of explosive, and he says that he could trace, with his contacts, he was very pro-Anglo. He loved the Anglosphere, but he said that there's a secret network. He called it the Milner Group or the Rhodes Network. It didn't have a real name that members were supposed to have. It was so secretive. Didn't have an official headquarters. They kept changing the meeting places. They rotated members in and out. Very few people who actually had an overview, and then there was, of course, people behind those people. And what he reconstructed was that this secretive group, they had influenced a significant influence over British politics, and they had this idea of, okay, let's get the Germans. Let's get the Germans to fight with the Russians, because this would be in the interest of the British Empire. If they kind of damage each other, Britain would be kind of safe, not just in Europe, but also the British Empire and other places. And it was like kind of this kind of very dangerous, stupid idea. And of course, Stalin had a similar plan. Stalin wanted to get the Germans obviously to fight the British and the French and others. Very explosive, very bad choice. Instead of being open and clear and working with the French, put the foot down, maybe step off the gas a little when it comes to the Versailles Treaty, maybe find better ways to handle the Germans, but they could have prevented something large. But instead, they had this other plan. Oh, maybe the Germans, because we don't really trust the Germans other than our relatives over there who spy for us. But if the Germans actually fight the Russians and anything in between gets kind of crushed, that could be beneficial to the British Empire, or what some people wanted the British Empire to be. Very old, weird networks. So this is kind of like, this ties very much into the Holocaust, even though Carroll Quigley, he explains it, what he thinks happened, but he's not putting it on the cover. He's not saying in the book title, this is how the Milner Rhodes Group was, kind of complicit in a stupid, dangerous scheme, which made it easier for the Holocaust to happen, blah blah blah. But it's in the book. It's really in there. And just to make that point real quick, Quigley insists that the network viewed France as a strategic obstacle to their preferred settlement. To the Milner Roundtable mind, this current architecture was unsustainable and strategically misdirected. It threatened to keep Britain entangled in continental enforcement actions, to permanently alienate Germany, and worst of all, to prevent the one geopolitical reorientation they increasingly desired, a revision of Germany's eastern frontiers at the expense of the Soviet Union, rather than a showdown in the West. Consequently, Quigley argues, the group set out to re-educate British opinion about France and to outflank French policy in every major test of the 1920s and 1930s. So instead of siding with the French or working with the French and keep the pressure low with the Germans, it just escalated, and it was and then it gets into this whole deception operation. And also Louis Kilzer wrote about this, 2 times Pulitzer Prize winner, in his book Churchill's Deception. He also says there was this network and they had this idea, we'll pretend to be friendly towards the Nazis, that pretend that we want to make a deal with the Nazis, so they will go east. And that completely backfired, according to Kilzer's understanding as well. And this whole plan, strategic deception, pretending to be friendly, and sabotaging the French, all of that was happening while the Nazis were saying everywhere they want to get rid of the Jews, and they started to track them and arrest them and put them in ghettos and in camps, and this leaked out everywhere. Stuff like this leaked out everywhere. This was not a secret, what was happening in Europe, but there was this plan apparently, this big deception, and point Hitler east, make him go east, while Jews were in super danger. And this is also one of the reasons why there's a distinctive paranoia with understandable paranoia with Jews nowadays, and why they react so much when there's a Tucker Carlson blabbing, or Candace Owens or Fuentes, because this is how it always starts. This is how it always starts. And some empires in the world, some countries in the world, they may add to this problem by making decisions of their own that may benefit them, these other countries, and put Jews in danger. And this is also the reason why Israel has cultivated a strong foreign intelligence service and a network of additional helpers. Because they want to know what everybody else is thinking. They want to know what everybody else is doing, and they want to get into these movements, and they want to, sabotage this craziness. Because at the end of the day, what American Nazis now believe, and what the German Nazis believed, that conspiracy lore is the same as what probably most Muslims believe. The Muslim world is full of it. It's full of that. So you have all this huge demographic, gargantuan demographic of Muslims believing this conspiracy mythology. Then you have the right wing more and more believing it, and then parts of the left are believing it. It's a problem, huge problem. And so just don't think some influencer can say, I would have done a much better job if I had, run Israel, if I had been in charge of Israel. I would have done a much nicer, much better job. It's crazy complicated. It's a monumental task, and it's easy to be like this armchair president or whatever, even though you don't know anything really, and you just adopt some slogans from the left, like, oh, those poor Palestinians, they're genociding Palestinians. What's a Palestinian again? Ah, okay, a Muslim. It could be a Jordanian, they could be an Egyptian. Why are you calling like a very regular military confrontation? Why do right-wingers make the same give out the same rhetoric as the left in the Cold War? All those poor Palestinians who were actually run by the Russians. Horrendous. Dysfunctional debate patterns. False dichotomies. Critics of administrative sprawl are accused of fascism. Defenders of constitutional breaks are accused of cowardice. Nuance, targeted reform without authoritarianism, gets drowned. Ends justify means moralism. Culture war stakes are described as apocalyptic. Any institutional norm can be sacrificed for victory, poisoning future governments. And movement incentives. Donor and media ecosystems reward maximalist rhetoric. Cautious institutionalists lose airtime in primaries. And of course, the Israelis and certain Jewish people with money and connections, they will try to counter this craziness, and of course, Israeli intelligence is doing operations, and Jews finance influencers, and they want to counter this stuff, and everything that Jews are doing is then reinterpreted by the crazies as evidence of the grand conspiracy. So it's like a lose framing situation against Jews. No matter what they do, they are expected to lose.
Yeah, in his lectures on Hitler and the Germans, Eric Voegelin cited Professor Waldemar Besson, who wrote that Hitler was an idiot. And, this is not the usual thing that you hear about Hitler. But Voegelin insisted that Besson was onto something. You could quibble with it, what is an idiot? Obviously, Hitler was intelligent. He had a good memory. He was able to accomplish things. But he meant that Hitler was a moral idiot, which we have a word in English, we call it a fool. And in fact, the Hebrew prophets, if you go back to the original Hebrew, they have a specific word that they use for that. It's a special kind of fool whose folly creates chaos and therefore destruction. And Plato referred to the irrational ignoramus, as be one translation of how Plato described them. And again, he said these are people whose ignorance creates chaos. And I think, and disorder. And of course, what is evil? Evil is a special kind of disorder. It's moral disorder in a very profound sense. This describes Hitler, because Hitler was dangerous because why? Because he had a defective view of reality. This is at the bottom of it. Anti-Semitism is evil because any defective view of reality creates distortions that lead to chaos, that lead to death, that lead to very ugly results. When someone begins obsessing over Israel, when the Jews become a bee in their bonnet, they will begin to gravitate, I think, towards Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Stu Peters, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes. The narrative of these folk are not just criticisms of Israel. I'm sorry. These narratives have an evil trajectory. They are headed to a place that the world was going to, that Central Europe was going to in the 1920s and 30s. And now that we're headed for serious economic dislocations and wars, people are going to become susceptible to this narrative. And I think we have to oppose it. If you're interested in the truth, if you want a good future for mankind, if you want to prevent injustice and the killing of people because they're Jews or because they hold certain vieys, you have to oppose this.
Yeah,
and
of course, if you're a guy, I call him the ADHD bait weasel. If you're like Fuentes, and you tell your followers, you need to behave like this. You need to say things and believe these things, and hate women and blah blah blah, and signal things. Either in public or anonymous on social media or in your circle, you need to behave according to a specific pattern. This pattern will frustrate these followers more. They will have more and more problems with women. They will have more and more problems with money, career. It's just the frustration will always increase. Like with any cult, any cult technique, you want to get people further into the cult so they can only work with other cult members, and everything outside of the cult is viewed as hostile. They don't understand you. They hate you. They want to destroy you. And it's this stupid idea of, we understand evil. We understand the root cause of evil, and we have the solution for it. And then they present a gimmick, right? It's not a thorough analysis, drawing from all kinds of sciences. No, it's a gimmick. So some people say, some people claim Jews are the root cause of evil. Then other people say private ownership and traditional families are the root cause of all evil, and just enterprise and trading, that's the root cause of all evil. Some people say any deviation from a traditional aristocratic empire or a traditional serfdom system, anything that deviates from that is the root cause of evil. Any deviation is a slippery slope into hell. Then some radical libertarians will say any government whatsoever is the root cause of evil. That's always been, the root cause of evil. And then these people will say like this, what was this guy's name? This once popular guy who then wrecked a shotgun in Washington, D.C. Adam Kokesh, who's partially Jewish. I don't even remember. He was kind of popular guy. He had a show on Russia Today, RT, when it was still on the air in America. And he, I think the first interview, or one of the first interviews on the channel, was Ron Paul, obviously. And then I think Kokesh did some, I think it was viewed as political advertising, a political advertisement for the Ron Paul campaign. And Ron Paul was very pro-Russia. And so this got Kokesh, I think, into trouble. I think he lost his job at RT, and he had his own weird influencer type operation going on. And he wanted this big demonstration in Washington, D.C., I think like an armed like an armed demonstration, even though that's not legal in DC to do so, hyping it up. And he had this idea, and some other groups that pretended to be normal conservatives, they also had adopted this radical idea that government is the root cause of all evil. They have to eradicate it, and so they want to dismantle the federal government of the United States. Then they want to next dismantle the state governments, and then all the way down to the counties and everything, and small town government, just dissolve everything, just basically destroy every serious structure. And of course, I've seen these radical libertarians. I've seen them become more pro-Russia. I've seen some of them turn, as you mentioned before, turn fascist again, but still claim to be libertarian, right? Because it's like, we see a communist threat, or we see the threat of the Jewish world conspiracy, and that's why we have to be fascist for a while, or aristocratic for a while, or we have to work with some fascists, anything to save us from the communists. They taught people in this radical libertarian sphere. They taught people to hate others if they don't want to become radical libertarians. Even if the person is a libertarian, even if the person is your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, anything, ghost them, disengage, disassociate, anything. Just treat them like they're dead, because this internet guru said so. And this is how the bridges are burned. This is how some circles, some networks want to destroy the right wing. And signal versus substance, just baseline stupid misogyny. And then, of course, the white power question that seems to divide the right wing. We've talked about this. I mean, I do understand basic human biology. I said this before. I'm not ignorant about it, but it's just too baseline what some people are doing. It's like, work for us, work for our movement, run by crazy people and maybe foreign governments. Work for this group, our cult, because you're white and the other cult members are also white. Wait a minute, that's not a reason to join this cult. That's not. Why is this? What do I have in common with some other guy being in a crazy cult for crazy reasons, just because we have the same skin pigmentation and maybe eye color? It just, the logic, the math isn't mathing. And so we get a fragmented media ecosystem, incentive misalignment. Right-leaning media is disintermediated, cable, talk radio, podcasts, micro-influencers. The economic logic rewards niche extremity and constant crisis, not coalition building. This splinters the audience into mutually suspicious tribes that punish compromise. Donor and primary dynamics, small dollar fundraising thrives on anger. Major donors favor ideological purity or narrow policy wins. Primaries incentivize punching right or left rather than persuading the median voter. Internal disagreements become performances for patrons in base segments. Organizational decay and trust deficits. Intellectual shortcuts and myth-making, and electoral costs. Swing constituencies, suburban women, independents, upwardly mobile minorities react badly to authoritarian talk, anti-woman rhetoric, and racial tribalism. The movement's policy brand is crowded out by its worst messengers. And then there's some examples like Bircherism and Buckley's excommunication, the alt-right surge, post-Dobbs realignment, and on and on and on, and some recommendations toward productive debates, so principles for a functional right, so how to talk to each other and figure out these questions.
The problem is that most people don't know recent history. They don't understand philosophy or the history of political movements, and they're just not able to understand what's happening around them. They want to grab something easy, take a shortcut, things that are titillating then get a hold of their attention. They hear someone like Fuentes boldly saying things, whether it's Holocaust denial or Hitler is cool, and they think, oh, that's a new thought. We're losing. Maybe Hitler was right. This kind of thing. Then, oh, wait a minute. You mean that's a lie? And oh, the Jews were behind 9/11? All of these different second realities, these falsehoods. People pretty soon they're no longer in touch with real reality. And this is what Voegelin said. He said, and this is a problem with our elite, being that businessmen kind of buy politicians, and you have a kind of a plutocracy that it's evolved into. Voegelin said for many years, illiteracy and stupidity, this radical moral idiocy, have run through our elite, and it's been progressively getting worse. And consequently, our society is going off the rails. Well, Voegelin used the word derailment. We have a derailment. It's like a train that comes off the tracks. We're not in touch with reality anymore. And we have 17 million people hanging on the words of someone who says Hitler was cool. I mean, that's what we had with the Tucker Carlson. 17, why didn't they tune him out? He was made to sound very plausible. We have Candace Owens saying that the French president's wife is a man. And millions believe her. My own people in my own family believe she's right. I mean, we have Alex Jones saying that our real enemy is found in the banking community, not in Beijing and Moscow,
and they can't
but our
get out of
banking
this.
community.
And they can't get out of this anymore if they start, if they do some better content, if they start making some right decisions, they get punished. I mean, no more money, all this hatred, and it's not just taking things away from them. Losing status, losing money. They will get death threats. They will get violence possibly directed at them by these crazy people.
I've suffered harassment from anti-Semites for years.
Oh my God, this Jones guy or Carlson guy, he's sold out to the world conspiracy, and now we have to punish him. It's just there's no end.
People have accused me of being bought by the Mossad.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't even think I have some older Jewish friends that I'm not really in touch with, but I don't communicate with Mossad or Israel. I don't have communications with, I'm not really connected that way. I'm saying what is I'm always striving to find out what the truth is, what is the real reality. And of course, that is the ultimate minority position. Remember Socrates, they made him drink the hemlock. If you try to stand up for what something that's true, or you don't want to embrace the lie that everyone else is embracing, you will be persecuted. You will be.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact.
There's this one piece. I wonder if I can find this real quick. This is about how reasonable a systematic analysis of how reasonable voices were drowned out in Europe in the past, and is for a long time, and then even into our modern age. This is. Let me see if I can find this. It's somewhere on my website. I can't find it on my own website here. Okay, it's not socialists played the anti-Semitic conspiracy game first. It's not.
And of course the left is doing this too. The anti-Semitism.
Today's influencers in the age of modern psychometrics. Maybe that was it. Okay. This is about. Yeah, this must be it. Today's influencers in the age of modern psychometrics and outdated ideologies. And I picked as a photo for this story a photo of Charlie Kirk, and behind him you see his smiling super donor, or previous super donor, with a cowboy hat on. And it says here, influence in politics has never been spontaneous. The voices that dominate public discourse are rarely the result of organic popularity. They're the outcome of strategic cultivation by elites who understand the power of messaging. Charlie Kirk, recently murdered founder of Turning Point USA, exemplified this tradition. His rise mirrors earlier figures in conservative media who were given platforms, money, and access in exchange for broadcasting simplified narratives favorable to specific interests. And so, there's like the Cold War foundations of conservative influence, anti-communist media networks, the whole Buckley thing. They wanted to police it all. They want to say what goes and what doesn't, but that they made huge mistakes. Just to give people an idea of the size, Buckley's column on the right was syndicated by Universal Press Syndicate beginning in 1962. From the early 1970s, his twice-weekly column was distributed regularly to more than 320 newspapers across the country. He authored 5,600 editions of the column, which totaled to over 4.5 million words. And so, I'm actually looking for a different piece here. This was about the early German media. I don't think I can find this now. I think this was it. In the Shadow of the Crown. How aristocratic intelligence networks cultivated and infiltrated the German and Austrian right in the 19th century. So there was all this stuff going on in Europe. The salons and societies and elite salons filtered talent. They found new talents. Lectures and readings were auditions. A promising pamphleteer left with subscriptions, a patron, and a warning about lines not to cross. Press, patronage, newspapers hemorrhaged cash without subsidy. Specific donors, even aristocratic donors stabilized those that flattered their policy line. Cultural journals became laundromats for political money. Lodges and learned societies, student fraternities, these Burschenschaften as we called them, money as leverage, and we had these early press experiments, conservative papers and pamphlets that glorified throne and altar, rarely paid for themselves, aristocratic subscriptions, awarded like prizes, kept them alive. In Vienna, Munich, and Dresden, publishers learned the same lesson. If you had a patron, you had a future. Those without patrons bled to death by the third issue, so to say. The Vienna perfected a subtle game. The police colonized the patriotic club world with informants. Editors who took the right tone found themselves invited to aristocratic salons and given printing contracts for court festivals. The reward gradient was unmistakable. Write to our music and your press runs. Improvise and you are suddenly a subversive. So you either thrived or you faded. And there was even Vienna's, two examples from Vienna, Schönerer and Lüge. This was Georg von Schönerer. Georg von Schönerer fashioned a radical pan-German anti-Semitic movement that scorned Catholic hierarchy and the Habsburg throne. His charisma drew students and artisans, but his defiance of dynastic and clerical power denied him patronage. He was surveilled, harassed, occasionally imprisoned, and repeatedly financially starved. His legacy was cultural, not institutional. Slogans others could later borrow. Then Karl Lüger, by contrast, embedded anti-liberal and anti-Semitic themes inside a respectable municipal machine aligned with conservative Catholic networks. He received elite cover. His Christian socials were allowed to govern Vienna or be popular in Vienna. Lüger's movement had donors, newspapers, schools, guilds, and longevity. And it goes on like this. Pan-German League, Navy League, Army League, all run by established circles. And then, of course, the left was playing the same game. People like Willy Münzenberg, he ran so many things in Germany to prepare us for a communist revolution. the newspapers, the periodicals, movies, everything. So theater plays, everything. And he was bleeding money everywhere. Almost nothing that he did was actually profitable, but he got his money, his money from Moscow. And that's how it worked. So you can be drowned out by the left. You can be drowned out by some very shady right-wing networks. And yeah, some guy says stupid things, gets millions of views. That's kind of how this game is played.
And that is toxic. That is absolutely toxic. We used to have in America and probably in Europe of newspaper readers, and of course, despite that, Germany was a church-going country where people were literate. Hitler still ended up coming to power, and they ended up following him, which was to someone like Eric Voegelin, who had to flee Vienna when the Anschluss happened. They could hardly believe it. They couldn't understand how the Catholic clergy and the Protestant clergy and so many went with the Nazis, and the number of people that went against them that ended up in camps was a small minority, relatively speaking. How could this happen to a great nation like Germany? And now, of course, the conceit is that, oh, it can't happen here. Americans can't do this. British can't do this. But if you set up the right condition in your country, if you celebrate the wrong celebrities, you can go there too. You can get seduced by this thing too.
Yeah, it's like the going from being a nobody with nothing. Suddenly you have an audience. Suddenly money is coming in. Suddenly you have a staff, and people talk about you. And for some people, any publicity is good publicity. They don't care. They don't care if people say you're the worst thing ever and you should be canceled and whatnot. But any publicity for some people is good publicity. And it's I saw this happen for so long, especially with Russian money and Russian opportunities and what goes into that.
The Russians are definitely pushing this along.
They get these young kids from university or who are in university or just finished university. They have no job yet. Nobody knows who they are. They don't have any original idea of themselves. And sometimes these young kids with no or very little work experience, they got contracts with Russia Today or Sputnik or some other outlets, and suddenly they were getting 60,000. They were making 60,000 a year or 70,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And even Alex Jones. I mean, he started out. Alex Jones started out real small, became bigger and bigger. Then he bought or got gifted Rolex watches or other expensive watches, and the super expensive piano, another house, another car. More and more bigger staff. Everybody was treating him like this dictator in his office, and he would run around with his shirt off like Mao did. Mao did that all the time. Was running around naked basically, just the authority when you have your own studio and everybody is scared of you. It's intoxicating to many people. And some like Owen Schroyer, who now had a falling out with Alex Jones. Schroyer was starting to say outrageous things about the Chinese, and maybe the Chinese, or maybe the Chinese. I think it was Schroyer, Owen Schroyer, who said that maybe the Chinese. Maybe the Chinese are actually fighting the world conspiracy or something. Maybe. Well,
I watched the segment. He didn't say maybe. He said China and Russia are the good guys, America's the bad guys.
Yeah, and so then he even Alex Jones tried this once or twice before, as far as I could see. Maybe there's a secret thing. Maybe there's a secret thing going on in China where they just pretend to be communist, but they're not communist anymore. Blah blah blah.
Good grief.
So they were aligned. Schroyer worked for Jones. Then they said some really stupid stuff about Sandy Hook, and Schroyer was expected to read whatever was handed to him, without real fact checking, no professional fact checking. He was reading stuff from, I think it was Zero Hedge, And then it came out he didn't even know who was running Zero Hedge, and that the people running Zero Hedge or founded Zero Hedge, they had some weird connections to Russia and are really connected to this regime, and didn't know who was actually behind this publication. And he said something, I just got this in. This is a really smoking gun thing about the Sandy Hook shooting. And he was confronted with that in a filmed legal deposition. And I'm masochistic in that way. I watched, I think, all these depositions in full, or listened to them while I was doing other things, like jogging or, I don't know, folding laundry or whatever. So I didn't lose any time with that, but I listened to all these depositions, and he was confronted with that. Did you fact check this? No. Did anybody else really fact check this? No. Do you know who runs Zero Hedge? No. Who was responsible for that whole segment? I don't know. Did you check it out? No. But we asked you to be prepared for this deposition so you could give us specific answers. Who is responsible for this report? Because laws and such, and so. He was trying to be a little Alex Jones impersonator, being paid to be that, and they talked about a salary. I think he got up to $100,000, maybe it was 100 with bonuses, like performance bonuses, 100 and was it $120,000? I don't quite remember. And I think he bought a house and a nice car or financed it, and he was going places, right? He used to be
some of us were working 50 hours a week at a day job to try to keep our heads above water, and these people were being paid off.
And he used to be, I think Schroyer was a little local sports broadcaster. He did not have a real background in research and history and politics and all that.
No, obviously not.
He got the job, and he became a little paid Alex Jones impersonator, doing what Jones wanted. But even they had a falling out. Even they started a fight. And now Jones said something along the lines of, if I remember correctly, that Schroyer is demonic, or there's he's influenced by demons and evil and bad.
Who was saying this? Who was saying this?
Jones was ranting about this.
And was he? He was saying
and this whole song and dance that we've heard a million times before. Yeah, I employed him, I paid him, and I treated him like a friend, like a brother, and I gave my last shirt to him, and he backstabbed me and he betrayed me. So everybody betrays Alex Jones apparently. So his two wives, pretty much every single former employee, or almost all former employees, everybody's always stabbing Jones in the back. I mean, it's wondrous how he picks his employees, but everybody just kind of leaves or gets fired, and there's like a big meltdown.
How long can you work for a narcissist? Crazy.
And it's just, and I think they had a falling out over Trump, because it wasn't clear at the time what position they would take on Trump. Should they go all in against him and say we're off the Trump train? They kind of played with that for a while, but then apparently they figured out, now we'll just go with it, and close our eyes and hope for the best.
They'd lose too many of their listeners if they did that.
So now I think I think what I saw today or yesterday, I think the current line is the deep state got to Trump because of the Epstein files, or the Epstein Jeffrey Epstein emails or whatever. And so maybe Trump, they got something on Trump, and he made a deal with the deep state, and that's why he's not saving America right now. That's kind of the current thing. So if they position themselves that way, they can always react accordingly. If something good happens, or something they can go with, something they like from the Trump administration, they can say, he kind of wrangled his way out of the reach of the deep state. He kind of showed the deep state who's daddy. But something bad happens with Trump, or something that Alex Jones doesn't like, then they can say, see, we told you, the deep state got to him. We told you, we give our audience the truth, right? It's like an oracle. It's like a silly pretend sham scam oracle who makes these predictions that always sort of come true because they're worded in a way and based on conditions that may be varied, right? And this is kind of like the this influencer world, the supposed brotherhood, and you watch it and they tell you, go drink a beer, go feel at home, we're your friends, we're your best buddies, we're saving America, this is all a brotherhood, and behind the scenes they're just at each other's throats.
Yeah, this is like people like that. They're vying for attention. They want power. They feel the lust for power. You can kind of see the
actually
titillated by power.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you and me, we are so much more wealthy than Alex Jones now. We are. I mean, in a legal
we're not
sense,
negative
we're not
billionaires.
negative billionaires. We're not negative billionaires. We're actually 1.5 billion dollars ahead of Alex Jones, and also Schroyer. I mean, he was riding high. He was making the good money. He was buying financing a house or whatever, I think, and a nice car. But then he kind of lost everything.
The moral idiot.
Yeah, but then he kind of lost everything because he was between a rock and a hard place when these depositions, because there was only one semi-way out for him. Say it was all Alex Jones. He's responsible. We do what he says. But then he's throwing Alex Jones under the bus. But he's still in trouble when he does that, and then the government
has to testify under oath. Which means
the government,
he has to tell the truth.
The government is after him, but then also Jones may be after him. And then when he had to start to pay for his own lawyers more and more. He was losing all his money, and then they had like a donation drive. Jones was hemorrhaging money. Jones was an inch away from having a studio and everything taken away from him because of the Sandy Hook thing.
Survived Sandy Hook
because of the Sandy Hook thing, and then Schroyer had to beg for money. Safe own Schroyer from ruin. Money bomb.
If you give money to these guys, you're a dupe.
I mean, I'm not.
These guys are
for a while they were riding high. There were also influencers in Germany and other parts of Europe who were copying everything these Americans were doing, and they were riding high.
All to sell expensive supplements.
Yeah, they were riding high for a while, and then came the problems, the legal issues, the hemorrhaging money, the infighting. Then they would start fighting for the little money that they still had, and it was just total annihilation. I think what kept some people afloat was Russian money. Russian subsidies or subsidizing. But this is like people copied them because they thought this is the golden ticket. This is the way to do it. And if you don't do it like these guys, you're stupid. How can you not do it like what they did? And I said back then, they're riding high now. This is all gonna come down. I don't want to be the German Alex Jones. I don't want to be that. But others wanted to be that, and now they kind of are. They were never as big as Jones. They were never, as wealthy, but they wanted to be the German, French, or whatever German Alex Joneses, and now they're kind of in a similar situation, not as bad, but similar to Alex Jones. Now they are the German Alex Joneses, but it's not fun to be that. Times have changed.
Yeah. Well,
and that's just the beginning. And that's just the beginning, because of the all the forensic evidence. Like NATO has its own unit where they collect forensic evidence. Who says what, in what timeline, copied from what Russian outlet. So it's information war. They can use that in court when the war starts. When the big war starts, then the NATO and the European Union and other entities and the US, they had these laws, Foreign Interference Act or whatever, Foreign Influence Act. They have the forensic databases. It's there. Going back, 10 years or whatever, since 2008 or something, they know who did what. And they have that as forensic evidence, and they can say, this was not free press. This was not opinion. This was information warfare. And the moment they can prove that and flow of money or other goodies, they're done. These people are done. Yeah. But maybe they could turn.
Well, anyway.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, we've been going almost 3 hours, so I want to thank everybody for joining us for this discussion. This has been Friends and Enemies. I'm Jeff Nyquist in America. My co-host Alex Benesch is in Germany, and I hope you'll join us next week for another edition of Friends and Enemies.